Time for me to tell you a story. All right. Let's say Kathy Abigail Hux was a single mom that returned. No, let's say a single mom when she returned to her old checkout job at the Red Bluff Market on Jeff Davis Road in Butler, South Carolina. This was not the path she had planned for herself when she packed up to go to school. Say college, so we'll be specific. To go to college in another state. No, this path was a circle that brought her right back to the place where she was born. Even her parents had left. One from death, and the other in an old folks' home in another state. Okay. Kathy, I guess you need an apostrophe there. I'm not going to put anything there yet. All right, Kathy had a great aunt still in town who could watch little Tina. Tina's name needs to be capitalized. Who could watch little Tina so that she could work her shifts and use the money for rent, discounted groceries from the Red Bluff. Alright, work her shifts, discounted groceries from the Red Bluff, and medicine when the girl got sick. That and not much else. Alright. That Sunday afternoon. Let's make it Saturday. No, we'll make it Sunday. Alright. That Sunday afternoon, she worked register 6. A teen boy had 4 and a young lady worked 2. There wasn't enough traffic when Kathy clocked in to justify 3 registers. But the crowd leaving the beach on Sunday morning had just finished, and the girl would be off in another hour or so. This store was off the beaten path. Most beach traffic hit the Walmarts. Let's say the Walmart. We'll say there's only one in town. Hit the Walmart. And the Food Lions over on Oceanfront in Fuller Beach. This store served the Butler area and the locals who hated the tourists and their traffic. Out on this road, alright, there's a lot of detail here that I may be cutting out in the edits, but I'm going to get it down now and then decide later if it serves or if it's a darling that needs to be cut. Alright, out on this road, better stores were, let's say better stores and chains, were just far enough away for people to put up with less selection and slightly higher prices. Truth was, Mr. Bluff had made a habit of adding in extras if more than a couple people asked for them. So the store had gone from groceries to clothes to hunting gear to lawn equipment and more over the years that Kathy first worked there in her teens. Since the Finches took over the place, there had been a lot of changes. Since Kathy had come back and Cody Finch took over operations from his dad, things had changed all the more. Okay. A wave of shoppers approached the three. Let me take out a little typo there. All right, a wave of shoppers approached the three registers all at once. That seemed to be the way. They could stand there doing nothing for several minutes and then everyone decided to check out at once, like they heard some kind of dog whistle tuned to customers' ears. Mrs. Anders. Okay, let's see. What registers? I got some unimportant details up here I need to keep track of. 6, and she worked register 6. A young boy had 4 and a young lady had 2. Okay, sorry. Seems unimportant, but I got to keep track of where I put everybody. Mrs. Anders went to 2 with her meat and a few vegetables for the evening meal. Alright. Fix vegetables. Alright. Old Jack's Thatcher had a few small items for register 4. 3 different people came to Kathy's line. She held in a sigh, and I got a lot of notes here for this story, but also probably not enough. Alright, she held in a sigh and gave her widest smile to Horace Grogan. The first in her line. This was the way things worked too. People would pile up on Kathy's line because she was older. They had a natural aversion to teenagers. Some came because they remembered her from years before, and they loved the familiar. Also, Kathy still had all the food codes memorized, so she didn't have to look them up. It was her punishment for being good at her job and too old for her job. Okay. All right. Horace didn't have a lot of items. but he frowned and shifted from foot to foot like he was in a hurry. This was a tricky situation. Kathy picked up the first item so that it didn't appear she was holding him back. All right. The first thing was a volume pack of duct tape in shrink wrap. Find everything okay, Mr. Grogan? He glanced around at the other registers and said, "Yes, fine. Thanks." She had completed her greeting obligation and proceeded to ring him up quickly. All right. The next two items were a plastic tarp and turpentine in the large canister. Kathy started to go under the counter for the larger bags, but Horace waved her off. And okay, I got an extra N in there. I was trying to figure out why they said I misspelled the name that I was making up. All right, but Horace waved her off and said he'd carry out himself. She took his money and started to count out his change. I know you can count. Just give it to me and let me be on. She did, and he hauled out his goods with his head down. The next guy had a skull mask on. At first, she thought, at first, Kathy thought it was the, I don't even know what you call this. At first, Kathy thought it was the protective hooding that bikers sometimes wore under their helmets. to keep from breathing in dust and bugs. The guy wore leather all over, but this was more like the old pandemic masks people had to wear years back, let's say. Alright. This one had a leering skeletal grin across the face. And highlighted shadows, let's say accents in a deep blue that matched the shaggy haired man's eyes. Kathy swallowed. Doing well today? He nodded, but that was it. She looked away and rung him up. This guy was buying. All right. Matchbooks. 20 of them. Let's say 120 of them by her quick count. Cough medicine. And a hacksaw. Let's say 13. No, let's make it big. 27 bottles of cough medicine and a hacksaw. Now let's add one more thing. We'll say a hacksaw and a candy bar from the impulse buy shelf next to the register. All right. She looked up at the fellow over his skeleton mask. There were rules about buying large quantities of cough syrup, and the matchbooks were a red flag too. However, Cody Finch, the new boss, had a policy of not questioning any purchase. He didn't care if they were cooking meth or burning their garage down around themselves. He'd rather sell all cough syrup than to let it sit on the shelves and go bad. Sell it and don't question it. Kathy bagged everything up. The guy left exact change on the metal counter, right down to the penny, including the tax. He took his bags and made for the exit. The boy and girl at the other registers leaned and talked to one another. Neither had bothered to call over the third customer waiting. So Kathy swallowed down the bitter taste in her mouth and smiled up at a man that had to be 7 feet tall. She didn't even know they made overalls that big. It looked like his pair were well worn, so maybe that size was hard to find. Alright, what is this freak buying? Okay. She greeted him and expected a deep voice like the butler on that old Addams Family show. He had kind of a high, squeaky voice, though. Kathy bit down on the inside of her cheeks to keep from laughing. He was friendly, at least. She rang up his items. All right. Edible glitter. A chia pet multi-pack. An inflatable elephant. In its tight sealed package. Baby oil. Say a dozen bottles of baby oil. 2 bottles of cheap champagne. All right. And a glow in the dark lizard eye bowling ball. God, they sold some weird stuff. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't. Say cough syrup doesn't go off. It may not. I'll have to look that up. And the owner of the store could just be wrong. That's always a possibility. I may actually add that in. Have her mention that she doesn't think it goes off, but she isn't going to say anything to the manager. That would be a good line. I appreciate it. God, they sold some weird stuff. It was a wonder they still had room on the shelf for food, even with the expansion. All right. She carded the giant for the cheap champagne. There were rules about selling it on Sundays in Rutledge County, but Mr. Finch, I'll say Mr. Cody Finch. All right, she carded the giant for the cheap champagne. There were rules about selling it on Sundays in Rutledge County, but Mr. Cody Finch insisted that he had an exception and it wasn't her business. Just sell what they wanted. This guy was 23, but looked to be in his late 50s. After he left, Kathy, let me put a new paragraph here. After he left, Kathy wished she had paid attention to his name, but not for long, because another wave of customers came all at once. Like before, several lined up at her register. The kids went on leaning. She was about to say something, but then a couple carts loaded with groceries got the other registers into action. Kathy figured she had the better deal with people carrying the plastic baskets. All right. Let's move some more weirdos through here. Marvin Yates unloaded first. His conversation matched the terse exchange with Mr. Green. I keep saying Green. Put a different name. With Mr. Grogan earlier. Alright. Marvin Yates unloaded first. His conversation matched the terse exchange with Mr. Grogan earlier. As she prepared to ring him up, he leaned in and asked in a low voice, "Was that old bastard Horace in here earlier?" That froze Kathy in her otherwise fluid process. There was something dark in the tone of the question. Horace Green? Oh, jeez, I keep saying Green. I might as well just change it to Green. I keep changing it to Green. Anyway, Horace Grogan? That's the one. Was he here? Kathy said yes. I don't need to do that. Kathy said yes before she considered she might want to stay out of it. All right. What's this guy's name? Marvin leaned in closer. She could smell his old man aftershave that stunk like a cleaning product. He whispered even lower, "What did he buy?" Kathy licked her lips. If she had room to back up a step without knocking over her stool, she would have. That was one positive of the Finches taking over. They provided stools for the registers because they didn't care if you sat down between ringing folks up. All right. She said, I don't remember. There've been a lot of people through today. Marvin looked around the store as if to challenge that excuse. He eyed her like he knew she was lying. Finally, he said, "Doesn't matter none. Just don't tell him what I bought." Kathy nodded and started ringing items up. Why and how would she tell Horace Grogan anything? He had already been through the store. It wasn't like he was making multiple trips. All right. Marvin Yates bought. All right, let's figure out the weird items he's going to buy. Bought bleach. Tarps of his own. Rope. 2 lengths of chain in 2 different widths. A tub, let's say a large plastic tub. A hammer and okay. 2 lengths of chain, a large plastic tub, a hammer, and a medium-sized pickaxe. All right. She gave him the total and asked in a soft voice, "Do you want me to bag this up?" He paid her and started throwing everything into the big tub. Just forget you saw me. She handed him his change without a word. He threw it all into the tub too and walked out. All right. Kathy felt cold inside as she looked at another skeleton mask over a bald man's mouth and nose. This one was highlighted in green, but the tall man had brown eyes and a diagonal scar across his forehead. He was taller than the blue skeleton, but much shorter than the giant with the edible glitter. Seeing a lot of masks today, she said. The fellow narrowed his eyes. How many? She shook her head. Just one other. He tilted his head as he stared down at her. One other is not a lot. Maybe if I'm not used to seeing any, it is. She saw his jaw working below the mask and decided just to run his items and get him out of here. Alright. What is this guy buying? Let's say he bought 7 frog eye masks, a taco sleeping bag, and a skin tight anatomy bodysuit. He used a credit card and ID with the name John Smith and a full head of hair. She absently told him to have a nice day and ran the next customer wearing sunglasses and a broad hat low over his ears. Before she could greet him, he turned his back on her. Okay. What am I having him by? He bought a tissue holder in the shape of a cat's butt. He bought, no, I don't need to say that again, 3 cases of hot mustard flavored soda. Okay. All that. Coyote urine. And coyote urine and 5 miniature rakes. The guy, did he buy anything that would be okay? The guy gave her 2 20s and left without his change. Kathy took the change out of her register and set it aside, as she would get in more trouble if her register was off. Okay. The next lull was not long enough, and there was Horace. Okay, don't need 3 R's in his name. There was Horace Grogan again, just like Marvin Yates feared. Did you forget something, Mr. Grogan? Alright, I need to put a question mark there. His eyes darted from side to side. Was Marvin Yates in here? She sighed and said, might have been. He could have gone through a different register. Did he go through a different register? Kathy felt, okay, let's just say it happened. Heat rose up in her cheeks. I don't know. If he does come through, would you give me a call? Kathy swallowed 3 times before she said, "No, sir. Can't do that. Can't or won't." When she didn't answer right away, he leaned in. She backed up, scooting her stool out into the aisle for the chained and closed register 7. Are you on his side? All right, let me put a question mark there. Are you on his side? She exhaled slowly and said, "I don't know what you two have going on, but it's none of my business. So I'm on my side, and my side is out of it." Horace blinked and took a step back. "Damn, girl. You could just say no." "You don't have to make a whole hysterical production out of it." She clenched her teeth and asked, "Will this be all?" "It's all I can carry, so it'll have to be." He said it with that sort of old man one-liner, southern charm that grew old on Kathy years and years ago. She started ringing him up. Alright, let's see what this weirdo was buying. Alright, do I have anything else down here I haven't mentioned? This time he had a large sports duffel bag. By store policy, she had to unzip all the pockets to check for hidden items. Horace crossed his arms as he waited but didn't say anything as she rang up the rest of it. He loaded the smaller items that would fit into the bag. All right. He bought an animal prod, like the electric things they used on cows, but smaller. She didn't know they carried anything like that, but the register recognized it, so she kept going. Alright, what else did he buy? He also purchased meat shredding claws, padlock, let's say dozens of padlocks, a muzzle, a harness, say a dog harness, and a ball gag. Let's say he snatched the gag from her hand as she stared at the register, still not believing it had rung up. Horace, okay, I need one more thing. Let's say a large animal cage. Alright, Horace paid, took his change, and strolled out for the second time that day. The next person in line had a yellow skeleton mask. He bought one of every candy sold by the register. The guy pointed after Horace and said, "Does anyone just buy groceries anymore?" She handed him a heavy bag of candy. She handed him a heavy bag of candy and said, "I'm starting to wonder." The next man in line was Marvin Yates again. He said, "Don't try to deny it. I saw Horace with all that crazy stuff. I waited until I saw his truck pull away to get in line." Kathy just stared without comment. "Now, I want you to tell me the truth. Was he by himself, or were there other folks with him?" "You said you saw him," she countered. "I don't have time for you to be cute. Just answer my question and then ring me up." She sighed and said, "I'm telling you the same thing I told him. This is none of my business, and I'm not getting dragged into whatever weirdness you two got going on. I'm not involved." Marvin did not back down as quickly. Marvin did not back down as quickly as Horace had. He pointed in her face. Marvin did not back down as quickly as Horace had. He pointed in her face and said, "I'll tell you this. If I found out you told him anything about what I was doing here, you better believe that." She slapped his liver-spotted hand aside. The kids at the other registers. She slapped his liver-spotted hand aside. The kids at the other registers turned to watch as they paused from ringing up perfectly normal grocery orders from regular customers. What the hell? Marvin squeaked like he was out of breath. if you have a problem with me or one of the other customers or whatever else, Mr. Yates, you can take that up with the Finches. If you want them involved in whatever business you got going on, then feel free. Marvin did recoil a bit. It was kind of a dirty trick on her part. The Finches had a long-running reputation for being a Southern crime family. As with most tales, they grew bigger, deadlier, and bloodier with the years and repeated tellings. At the very least, it shut Marvin Yates up. He waved impatiently at his items, like she was... What is the story you're writing about? I'm not 100% positive. I'm doing 31 stories in May, so I've kind of gotten down to some titles that I'm just trying to figure out. This one is called Register 6, and it's about a woman that's in a grocery store where people are buying weird things, and there appears to be some conflicts going on outside of the store that are kind of playing out with things that are being bought. So I haven't quite wrapped it up to an ending yet. But we're getting close to, I think, the action scene where all these things start to come together. So, to be honest, I'm kind of figuring out as I go. But thank you for asking. All right. He waved impatiently at his items like she was holding him up. She rang him up without paying too much attention to the connotations. All right. Let's see what weirdness he is buying. All right. Let me fix a typo here. All right, that's connotations. All right, so he buys this time. She bagged up his plastic tubing, bottles, let's say jars of Vaseline, and okay, that has to be capitalized, that needs to be lowercase. Okay. What have I left out? I think I've written down everything that I've put on here. Jars of Vaseline, canisters of kerosene, dozen bandanas, empty mason jars, and a pair of trigger gas lighters. Alright, that's weird enough. Okay. He hefted his bags in one strained hand and marched out the door. A guy still wearing his motorcycle helmet put a bag of dog biscuits, a Bible in plastic, a stack of zombie movie DVDs, and a bottle of fish tank antibiotics on the counter. All right, now we'll get to the action here. She was about to greet the fellow when something exploded outside. She turned in time to see a ball of fire mushroom up past the front windows. Kathy couldn't tell how far away the blast was, but all the shelves in the store shook. She spied Marvin by the doors, say just outside the doors. She spied Marvin Yates just outside the doors with his bags from his most recent purchases. Purchases scattered on the ground. He was squeezing. Come on now, let's spell something right here. He was squeezing a canister of burning fluid. Good Lord, I've lost my ability to spell. A canister of burning fluid out into the parking lot. Kathy tried to remember. Kathy tried to remember where she had parked. She couldn't afford another car. A shovel blade swung into view and caught Marvin square in the face. All right. Horace Grogan stepped into view over Marvin on the ground. He lifted the shovel over his head, and for one crazy moment, all Kathy could think was whether Horace had bought that shovel here or not. She couldn't remember. Several men in, okay, let's say a man in an orange skeleton mask. Spell skeleton correctly while we're here. Okay, a man in an orange skeleton mask pulled the shovel out of Horace's hands. Horace didn't miss a beat as he fell on Marvin and started choking him. Boy and girl at the other registers lifted their phones and started recording. The dude in the helmet left his items and ran back through the store. Kathy called out, Could one of you call the police while the other films it for TikTok or whatever? An older woman at register 4 took out her phone and made the call. Several men in skeleton masks pulled Horace off of Marvin. Then they dragged Marvin up to his feet and away too. It was only then that the scrawny manager, Cody Finch, had hired, came running up to ask what happened. Kathy just shook her head. Sirens sounded, and a fire truck arrived. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Hope things go well for you. I got no idea what I'm writing right now. This story just kind of started, and it's sort of winding toward an end, so this is not going to be the greatest tale ever told, but definitely one that's going to need some editing and kind of finding its voice here in a minute. All right, siren sounded, a fire truck arrived to put out a building across the street that Kathy couldn't remember. Kathy couldn't remember what it used to be years ago. Today, it was a bonfire. The manager had Kathy and the other two finish ringing people up. She never saw the guy in the helmet again, and so had to reshelve his stuff between customers. Eventually, the manager came out and said, Mr. Finch decided to close for the day, but they would be paid through the end of the shift. They would be called that night for tomorrow's hours. Police were on the scene as Kathy drove away, but they didn't ask any questions about what happened. As she drove to pick up Tina, she tried to put another bad shift behind her. All right.